Good afternoon. Welcome back to BioBlast. I'm Devin Zeidelman, Director of Scientific Real Estate Advisory Services with Scheer Partners. And today we have the pleasure of hosting Samir with Georgiamune, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Founder, and President. Samir, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Devin. My pleasure.
So for those that are less familiar, we'd love to learn more about Georgiamune and obviously what you're doing in terms of groundbreaking scientific discoveries. But before going into further detail about the company and the technology, would really like to understand just more about your professional background and kind of the arc of your career.
So I'm a physician scientist. I'm a medical oncologist trained at NIH, the National Cancer Institute, and I'm a scientist, immunologist. I have done my career through a double track, which is clinical and research. So I've spent more than 20 years at NIH. I was one of the early investigators that worked on the development of immunotherapy for cancer, which was a very new budding field. I also led the development of two cancer centers, and I was the CEO director of those cancer centers. One of them was in the country of Jordan, where I was sent by our government to build the King Hussein Cancer Center in Jordan. I was the CEO of that hospital and the cancer center. And the other one is in Georgia for the University System of Georgia, which is the cancer center at the Medical College of Georgia. I also served as a special assistant to the FDA commissioner, helping in the development of the critical path, which really revamped the way drug development approval process happens for cancer. And then finally, I spun out Georgiamune from when I was in Georgia, and hence the name, and where I was the director of the cancer center, Georgia Cancer Center. And now I am in Maryland, lead the company, and I also have a professorship appointment at Georgetown.
Yeah, Hoya Saxa, my alma mater as well. But an incredible journey, and you've seen a lot of global viewpoints, and certainly coming from NIH and sort of a federal background, having exposure to clinical studies and that process in terms of how it's changed over time, especially as you see new novel technologies be adapted, as you see, new modern discoveries in terms of precision medicine or mRNA and targeting, the oncology type of modalities. How have you seen, the regulatory side of things change, and where do you think we are in terms of a country right now, in terms of just how you're thinking about data and efficacy and safety?
So look, FDA and regulatory agency, the regulatory agency of the US, is probably one of the most adaptable federal agencies, if not as agency. The thinking at the regulatory agency have evolved very fast and actually has led to almost catching up with the science, which is not usual and not something that is common. Accordingly, lots of things have changed in the past 20 years with the regulatory environment, where things are happening now in more flexible way, in a more time efficient way, with maintaining, for absolutely the case, with maintaining the proper safety and efficacy goals for FDA. So I commend the FDA, particularly in the cancer side, because this is where I work mainly. And of course, immunology is something that's happening more and more now for autoimmune disease. But they have absolutely been phenomenal in towing the line of how to evolve and develop. The Center for Cancer, the Oncology Center at the FDA, also led a big part of that. Having said that, going back to your point, a lot of things are, yes, changed in the past 20 years, but many are going to change even more in the next 10 to 15 years in the conduct of clinical trials, particularly with the presence and development of bioinformatics, and more importantly now, AI. So a lot of trials could probably started to be done faster and accruing the appropriate patients more selectively. And as importantly, or even more importantly, that in the future, there are going to be lots of trials that will be conducted in silico based on lots of information that we have, whether biology information, patients information, biomarker information, the drug information, to predict what could happen in the future and what could happen to a specific drug. And then those clinical trials on patient might be much smaller, more beneficial, because we will be treating more of those relevant patients that could benefit from specifics that we don't know now, because the science is not there and the AI has not been fully integrated. But I believe that within the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see that particular revolution. So a lot of things will be changing to the better, although we are definitely, no doubt, Devin, at a curve of development and progress in medicine that has never been seen before. And that curve is growing logarithmically rather than in a linear fashion. So we're lucky to be alive in this time and working in this field, but this is why I think we're going to be seeing even more development, even in drug development, right? Because currently we do a lot of things from a regulatory perspective that would take us 3-4 years sometimes to even start a clinical trial, just to do the toxicology studies, to do the development, the manufacturing, the optimization of the drug, all these kind of things. And I believe also technology and AI is going to be helping a lot in this and shorten the time, because we don't have to do wasted effort, since some of the information might be clearer for us of how we need to develop those.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations on this show and just sort of in general within the sector about the implications for big data and artificial intelligence. And certainly there's a lot of use cases that are being developed by industry, and then obviously from institutions as well. But when you think about your pipeline at Georgiamune and the way you're developing technologies and bringing them through the clinical trials, and really thinking about the risks involved with that, with some of these emerging technologies, how do you as a leader mitigate risk at Georgiamune? And then how do you take lessons from your past in terms of how you approach risk?
So there are many ways to mitigate risks. Some of them we just talked about and I reaffirm them, but the most important, really, the most important as a leader that built few institutions before, and now I am working on building this company, which is a very cutting edge company. So the risk is always there, right? Because you are on the cutting edge of something new and you're taking a very novel science and novel medicines forward. And as you know, all our drugs that we've developed, 9 of them are first in class, so they're extremely novel. But the most important mitigating factor for risks is to surround yourself with the best people ever. That is the bottom line. Hire the best team, put around you the best advisors and consultants, and that would by itself mitigate every single risk in any step that you take. So that's number one. And Georgiamune has been extremely successful in this. I mean, we have a really dream team of employees, leaders, advisors, and consultants that are really phenomenal. So that's number one. Number two, for mitigating risk, you have to be very clear in your approach. And this is what we've been doing at Georgiamune for the whole team and for yourself as a leader, in making sure that you follow 2 very strict rules: preempt and pre-prepared. And we always do that. We manage every project with preempting thinking and preparing for the potentials and proper program management that could trigger a point at any time, and we know who to call and with whom to talk. So that's second. Third, which is probably one of those very important that are obvious, is keep yourself, the employees, absolutely up to date with everything in the field, because that would always help. But these are the major issues in how we mitigate risks and how we follow up on it.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you state that and position it, especially given your background. You've been really successful in the public sector and arguably the private sector. You hear a lot about the lack of commercialization opportunities coming out of these large federal institutions because it's a government supported job. It's sticky, but when you think about just sourcing talent and you think about even synergies with those researchers on the federal side, do you see that it's more of an institutional kind of culture that doesn't really help folks or lean folks towards commercializing technologies?
It's all about culture, and all about understanding what is the goal of what you're trying to do. I mean, you hit on very important elements. So, can you commercialize things out of the government? You can, but that's not particularly in the defense industry, right? I mean, that's something that that has been much more mature in certain areas of the government, like DoD, than in other areas like HHS. So some are very much ahead of their, at least ahead of the curve on that. DARPA was one of the major part. The DoD has multiple institutions within DoD and units that actually lead to that entrepreneurship, and most of that commercialization through partnerships, right? Through partnerships with other commercial entities or private entity. NIH is maybe less than that because what is the purpose of NIH is to discover basic science and take risks that other private institutions and entities cannot do. It is less of the commercialization part, and that applies to universities, as you know. I mean, this is one reason that I've pulled out Georgiamune, and I did it because universities are not used to commercialization. And as somebody said, universities might be the largest cemetery in the world for patents and IPs, right? Because that's not the intent. That's not the purpose. And there's the incentives there are not, and I'm not talking about all universities. Some of them are phenomenal, as you very well know, but the majority are not set up to that. So there is very different, and that's culture and purpose and aim, right? It's the mission of that organization. And if you are working in the government, your box, there are a lot of limitations of what you can do, a lot of limitations of you can be involved with, rightly so, because of lots of rules and lots of regulations. But that would not allow you to be able to have that absolute out of the box, completely free thinking sometimes because of certain rules and certain regulations that are very well designed to protect a lot of mishaps. So it is all about the cultures. Now, when you go to the private sector, you have the chance to commercialize, right? There's a lot of reasons why you should commercialize. At the first place, that's the purpose of the private sector. But again, it all depends on the culture that you install within the organization and the culture that the employees are thinking about and growing up with, and how much is driven towards not only creativity and innovation, but also taking that into practical use and commercialization.
Yeah, and you've been very helpful in me teeing on my previous question and sort of bridging it to Georgiamune. Can you talk to me just about how you begin thinking about immunotherapeutics and developing a company around that technology, and then getting to where you are today? What were some of the milestones that you felt like were really impactful in your business formation and commercialization efforts? And then within that sort of larger umbrella, just thinking about also the financing dynamics of scaling a company with the right culture, with the right talent, with the right pipeline?
That's a lot of questions. I hope I'm going to remember all of them,
Yeah.
Devin, but if I don't, please remind me.
Yeah, well.
So Georgiamune is a science and discovery company. We really do very basic research to discover novel observations and novel finding in the biology of the immune system. So it's not only a drug development company. We're not based on licensing drugs and develop them and move them forward. We're really a very fundamentally within the DNA of the company is it's a science and discovery company. And when we discover that novel science, we find its potential application, and then we develop those drugs forward. And this is why we were able to develop 9 very novel drugs that are first in class based on purely very novel biology. And we insist on that novel biology because if we discovered something that is similar to something else that's been discovered before or a little bit tangent to it, we really try to ignore it. We want something that has not been discovered before. So the development of this was somewhat very exciting from our perspective, because when you find something so novel that could, because of the fundamental biology of it, it could apply not only to cancer, but also autoimmune disease. Because you know, Devin, cancer and autoimmune disease are 2 sides of one coin. In cancer, the immune system is not functioning well. So cancer developed because the immune system is incapable of fighting the cancer. And in autoimmune disease, it's exactly the opposite. The immune system is hyper-functioning, is over-functioning abnormally, that is attacking our tissue. So the biologic link between them is one. So if we discover something that's important for inhibition or activation of the immune system, we can turn it on or off in either of those diseases. And this is what Georgiamune has been doing. And this is what we have developed. So this is why we develop drugs now. Half of them are for cancer and half of them are for autoimmune disease. Tell me, what was the other question?
Yeah. And so how do you approach, with novel discoveries, generating novel therapies, it's very risky for investment. And so how do you approach fundraising, and how do you think about that as you scale the company?
Yeah. So look, investors are pretty intelligent. They see things. So one thing that helped a lot at Georgiamune is, from the science and drug development perspective, is twofold. One, we're not developing a Me Too product. So it's these are novel drugs. Mm-hmm. But second, the science and biology of those drugs is clearly important in a huge element of an unmet need in both cancer and autoimmune disease. For example, the majority of our science in cancer, immunology, that we develop now the drugs for are in patients that are resistant to immunotherapy. And those are 85% of patients in cancer. So when you have 85% of patients do not respond to the currently available immunotherapy, the question is, from our perspective, why? Mm-hmm. This is what we are discovering, and accordingly, we're developing those drugs against this unmet need. So the 3 factors that help us is, one, these are not a Me Too drugs, very new, novel drugs. Second, they serve unmet need areas in both cancer and autoimmune disease. And then third is, we're not a company that develops only one drug and we're concentrating on it. We have multiple drugs because the science and the platform that we have is very productive to lead to discovery of new and novel biology, and more importantly, develop more drugs. So that's one part. The second part that helps a lot is what we talked about before, is we have a great team. Mm-hmm. And a lot of investors not only invest in the science and the biology and the drugs, but also in the team that's there. And that's definitely something that would that helps a lot. So these are the major issues that I believed helped us in being one of the highest fundraising startup biotechs in the country. And in Maryland, since we're talking about Maryland, we were the highest in 3 years. Like in the past 3 years, we were the highest to be able to do that. And that doesn't come from vacuum. It comes from the substance that you have at the company, and the investors are pretty bright and intelligent to see that.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about science is it's very binary, right? It's black and white. You have data, you test, you get results that either allow you to move forward, or you get results that don't, and you have to modify. And so when you think about the milestones that your company is working towards, but then also, as we talked about, you have a very diverse pipeline of 9 targets, and doing the type of research relative to each of those potential opportunities, even thinking about it from a commercial lens, arguably in my mind would require kind of different types of facilities or space. And so can you just speak to sort of your approach to one of the more expensive line items, for any company that's scaling in the biotech space, which is the facilities and infrastructure that you've developed here in Maryland?
So, I mean, look, this is a great question. And the most expensive in facility and infrastructure is manufacturing. Mm-hmm. These are the ones that actually cost a lot. We don't manufacture things inside. We actually farm this out. What the company does is the critical part for a biotech to do, which is the science, discovering drugs, and developing the drugs, and then running the clinical trials, right? But the things that requires huge facilities, and there are a few of them in Maryland, actually, they built huge facilities it required manufacturing. We do not need to do manufacturing here because you can contract those out. And there are many companies are great, they can manufacture it and do well. So the infrastructure that we have here in Maryland, which is part of the biotech park, is a space where the most important is where we have our laboratories and our animal facilities to be able to do the development, the discovery of the science, the development of the drug, and the testing of the drugs. So those are here. They're available. And as you know, and there are in the biotech park in Maryland, there are lots of those facilities that are available. We're at Alexandria Life Sciences and others that are clearly here, but that we have here. This is how we handle it. We're not going to be doing manufacturing. This is not something that biotech should do. I mean, some may, but as a startup, we use those from outside resourcing.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about Maryland and just the community that we have here. Obviously, you're sourcing top talent. You have state-of-the-art lab facilities for research. You have built a culture that you're really proud of. You can just tell from conversation. So what do you attribute that to, kind of your managerial style, and then also attribute to like the board and the advisors that you pulled in just from the executive team? And are there any specific comments that you might have just in terms of your role in the larger ecosystem of the Maryland biotech community?
So first of all, the culture at Georgiamune is really a fabulous culture. Mm-hmm. The bottom line of it is it's really, we encourage a lot of employees' engagement. And as importantly, we encourage a lot thinking out of the box, taking risk, and being creative and innovative. And as I mentioned before, it's embedded in the DNA of Georgiamune. And actually, there are lots of programs within the company that are focused on making sure that this would be the culture and will continue to be. Many programs. Mm-hmm. So that's always a great thing to have within a company, because people that we try to recruit and work with and hire are people that want them to think out of the box, think not within the norm of, well, the field think about it this way. Yeah, who cares? Let's think differently, right? So that is the major element of what we have. Now, Georgiamune, I hope it will be a big part of what we're doing in Maryland, because Maryland clearly is increasing its biotech power from the governor down. But I mean, this is a place, this area of biotech park is growing pretty fast, as you very well know. And that's wonderful. And we have very huge. I mean, our next door neighbor is BioNTech, and that's the level of companies that exist in this area, which I think it's very good, because it is very conducive for that creativity that I was talking about. Because when you always have this mass of people around you, and the facilities that are built, and the companies and firms that are there to be able to provide that. So that applies to, this is what applies to us, and this is why we're happy here.
The interesting concept you stated, biopower, right? When we look at markets, just from my lens, it's really along the lines of kind of the four pillars, or the four prongs, which is access to talent, access to ideas and intellectual property, access to capital, and access to facilities. But can you just unpack that a bit further from your seat? Just what is biopower? What does that concept mean for you?
So it means that those four pillars that you have mentioned are hovering around what we're trying to do, which means we don't need to spend a lot of our energy, time, effort thinking how we need to access any one of those. Now, there are things that are more difficult than others, of course. Access to capital, that may be the most difficult. Access to talent is less, but Maryland was able to at least. So look, I mean, Maryland is one of the best places for concentration of intellectual talent, right? We have 7 universities. We have NIH. We have FDA. We have the Naval Hospital, and so there are lots of talent available in this. So that's one. The second is the facilities are there, and yes, we were lucky to find the facilities that we need, but they're there. They're available, and they're pretty good. So the issue is, in addition to talent and facility, is now we're left with capital. And again, this is on you. So if you have the facility and you have the talent, it's important now to have, it becomes easier to raise the capital, because the idea and intellectual property are generated, which are the fourth pillar, are generated by the company. And this, from Georgiamune perspective, we have, but also from other institutions or companies. Well, the presence of 7 universities around you should provide you with that too.
Yeah. I mean, very well stated, very well said. I love the concept and notion of biopower, especially for Maryland and some of these top markets. But, more importantly, you all have been recognized by your peers and nominated as a finalist for the BioBuzz Awards. And so what does that mean to you as the leader of Georgiamune and as the founder?
Look, I'm definitely proud of the team. Proud to be recognized like that, especially that the BioBuzz Award is the big breakthrough company of the year award.
Yeah.
That's what we are most proud of, because this is what Georgiamune is all about, is breakthrough, is innovation and creativity, as I mentioned to you before. So that's very important from our perspective to be recognized by our peers, and we thank all of them. And it's great for us, because it's also an affirmation that what we're doing is really something that our peers respect and they believe highly and think highly of. So that's great for every employee that we have. I know they're very proud. And I know we've been contacted more and more of lots of great scientists, great talent to be part of our company. So that makes us even more happy about what we do.
Yeah, you all have done some incredible work and continue, to proceed, but with the lens, I would argue too, of patient care and curing some really severe diseases. And so we just appreciate you all for your work. Appreciate you for joining us today on BioBlast. And for folks out there, Dr. Samir Khleif, the founder, President and Chief Executive Officer of Georgiamune. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Devin.